It's date night and you want to wow your partner. You split a pasta appetizer complete with a shower of fresh Parmesan, and now the main courses are arriving. Your steak smells delicious, and so does the snapper poached in olive oil. You've even ordered a bottle of champagne. It's a special night after all. But there's just one problem. Everything about this night is built on a house of lies. A lot of the food on your plate isn't what it seems. In fact, this is surprisingly common. On this episode of the Infographic Show, discover the truth. Everyday foods you eat that aren't real. The American pantry is usually pretty stocked. We have a larger selection of food options than at any time in human history. It's a combination of advances in agriculture, food technology, and imports and exports that allow us to have our favorites even when they're not in season. And we know many of those foods aren't natural. After all, no hunter-gatherer ever stalked a Pop-Tart or wild Spam in the grass, and that's led to many people advocating a return to natural ingredients. Diets like the Mediterranean and keto diets suggest that we should be eating more like our ancestors and gravitating toward foods with simple ingredients. But that is easier said than done, because the simplest foods might be the most deceptive. It usually comes down to that evergreen factor, money. Many of the best ingredients are expensive, so companies have two options. They either replace them with a less expensive alternative and hope people don't notice, or they just water them down enough to cut costs while hopefully not impacting flavor. And then there's the fact that maybe something was labeled correctly on the shelf, but not when it winds up included in a restaurant dish. And we're eating or drinking many of those imposters on a daily basis, including moments after we wake up. That's right, not even coffee is safe. For many people, coffee is a necessary ritual to kickstart their day, and for some of them, they're very picky about what they put into their cup. They buy the beans whole, they grind them with a specialized machine, and brew their own coffee with a high-end machine every morning. And then there are the rest of us who buy large amounts of instant coffee and enjoy that reliably bitter taste every morning with no fuss. The coffee already comes as fine grounds that transform into that beloved beverage in minutes. And that's a problem, because what's really in those grounds? Food expert and author Larry Olmsted analyzed the content of ground instant coffee, and while he did find actual coffee, he also found a whole lot more. Some additives were common coffee substitutes like chicory, but the mix also contained unexpected ingredients. This included cereals, figs, and fillers, and flavorings like starch, malt, and caramel color. There were even non-edible materials like ground-up parchment. This no doubt has led many coffee snobs to say, "See, this is why I'll never get instant coffee. I only buy my beans straight from the farmer that grows them." And that's not the only common morning drink that may not be what it appears. Milk is a staple, not just at breakfast, but at lunch, especially for millions of school kids each day. And if there's one ingredient we should know the source of, it is milk. After all, it just squirts out of the cow, right? But most milk today is heavily processed, going through pasteurization to eliminate 99.99% of contaminants from the cow it originally came from. This is a boost for food safety, but it also means that it provides more opportunities for those along the way to adulterate it and cut some costs. And this had deadly results in one case. In China in 2008, a massive scandal erupted when a baby formula milk had been diluted with water. The responsible parties added melamine to increase the protein content, but they miscalculated the nutrition requirements, and thousands of infants became sick, resulting in 6 deaths. In the United States today, the ingredients are usually a little more clear, if people bother to look at them. If you're a fan of orange juice for breakfast, be careful what you pick up. If you're a fan of the most famous names like Tropicana, you'll want to look for a label that says 100% orange juice. That's usually an indication that you're getting the real thing. The label only has one ingredient on it. However, many of the common orange juice brands don't give you pure orange juice. They water it down, mix it with other fruit juices, and even add sugars or artificial flavors to make it smoother, sweeter, and more kid-friendly. And one of the most famous brands may barely qualify as orange juice at all. Sunny D, formerly known as Sunny Delight, is one of the most popular brands of orange drink, which is what it has to call itself. The shelf-stable orange-colored drink is popular, but it's also infamous for its long list of ingredients. The formula of the original flavor has orange juice as the third ingredient, after water and high-fructose corn syrup. That's then followed by tangerine, apple, lime, grapefruit, and pear juices. There's also additives like cornstarch, cellulose gum, multiple artificial colors and preservatives, and even the artificial sweetener sucralose. This takes many parents who thought it was a healthy alternative by surprise. In fact, it's easier to say which drinks are what they say on the can than those that aren't. When it comes to most sodas, you probably expect to be getting fizz, sugar, and artificial flavors. With one exception, ginger ale is one of the oldest sodas and it's actually renowned for its medicinal purposes. It's reportedly good to settle an upset stomach thanks to the properties of natural ginger. Or at least it would be if there was any ginger in it. If you look at most popular ginger ale brands today like Schweppes, you'll just see natural flavors on the label, and that means they're likely getting a tiny bit of concentrated ginger extract mixed into the soda, if that. This has led many people to switch to small-batch craft sodas that offer that classic ginger punch that people remember from the old days, although the price might cause an upset stomach. And now that the drinks have been served, let's get some food on the table. Is there any more luxurious main course than steak? Those ribeyes and fillets can command a pretty penny at a steakhouse, and getting some cuts from the butcher for a cookout can be pretty expensive too. Thankfully, there's always the grocery store, where you can find all sorts of fancy cuts for a reasonable price. Some are on the shelf priced by weight, while others come in frozen preset packages. You can even find some steaks at the dollar store, like bacon-wrapped tenderloin fillets frozen in 2-packs. So what's their secret? Well, would you believe they're not steaks at all? Sure, they're beef, and that is real bacon surrounding the tenderloin, but the secret to steaks is that they come from specific cuts of beef, and that is definitely not the case for these discount steaks. They're typically made of meat scraps that have been fused together using transglutaminases, or enzymes that bond protein. This allows the meat to be formed into the shape the designer wants and then sold as steaks. If something is too good to be true, it usually is. And the king of beef may be a royal imposter. Kobe beef is an acquired taste, both in terms of taste and its sky-high price. This slow-aged, ultra-fatty delicacy is among the most prized meats in the world. It's produced through a highly specific process that ensures the cattle live in luxury, at least until their inevitable trip to the slaughterhouse. It's often been described as like eating meat butter, and even a few ounces of it can command several $100s. It's also exceedingly rare, mostly being sold in Japan, with only a few restaurants in the United States offering it. So why, for a while, did it seem to be everywhere? When the buzz on Kobe beef started exploding, everyone wanted in on it, and so many American beef producers started experimenting with producing their own. But just because it's like Kobe beef doesn't mean it is Kobe, and many beef aficionados were angry to find out that they were eating American knockoffs. American Wagyu, the closest US-produced alternative, is now usually labeled properly and has found quite a bit of success as a high-end option at Korean and Japanese barbecue restaurants. See, sometimes it's best to just be yourself. And it's not the only meat imposter out there. Ah, sushi, another luxury dinner that can run up quite the bill. But for those who aren't feeling quite as adventurous to try the tuna belly, there are other options, like crab sushi. This is usually fully cooked and it offers a small piece of meat that looks like a shelled snow crab leg. It's normally one of the more affordable options on the menu, which is a surprise. Snow crab legs are known to be one of the big money items at a seafood restaurant or at the Vegas buffet. So what's up with the case of the cheap crustacean? Well, it turns out you might be eating a totally different animal. Most of the crab served at sushi restaurants is actually a formed product usually nicknamed sea legs. While they have the shape and the color of crab meat, they're usually made from finely ground and formed whitefish, and sometimes flavored with around 35% of crab. This product, which is similar to Japanese fish cake, is sold with the appropriate labels at supermarkets, but it can sometimes become an imposter in sushi restaurants. However, it usually has a small list of ingredients, is low in fat and calories, and is a popular choice at kosher sushi restaurants, where seafood is a no-no. So you could do worse. And it's not the only part of sushi that you need to watch out for. We've all made that mistake of using a little too much wasabi on our sushi, and whew, that is not something you forget. This intense Japanese root is incredibly spicy, but it's also notoriously difficult to grow and keep fresh. So many manufacturers simply assume that the average diner won't know the difference. They just associate wasabi with spicy and green. So manufacturers sell blends of horseradish and mustard paste liberally colored with green food dye. And because the real thing is challenging to get, even many sushi buffs in the US have never tasted the real thing. But sometimes food isn't a clever substitute, it is a straight-up imposter. While steak is the most iconic item associated with fine dining, fish restaurants are becoming more and more popular. But not everything on the menu is what it might appear to be. Tests have shown that many fish dishes are relabeled. One of the most commonly mislabeled is red snapper, with sole being a common culprit as well. And not even the humble tuna is safe. It's been found to sometimes be replaced with escolar. a cheaper and oilier fish that has been known to cause, intestinal distress. And the heartier the preparation, the easier it is to disguise. Fish and chips is one of the most popular ways to have fish, especially in England, and that golden fried crust is often the highlight. It certainly covers up the mild flavor of the white fish, and that's led to some trickery. While cod was the most popular choice in the past, overfishing has led to price hikes, and that means it's sometimes replaced with pollock, a common fish in mass-produced seafood treats. However, in the UK, it's also been found to be replaced with spiny dogfish, an endangered shark species. And it's not just the main course you need to worry about, it's the condiments. It's one of the most entertaining parts of dining at an Italian restaurant. When the waiter comes around with a fresh Parmesan shaker, that shower of nutty hard cheese makes everything taste better, and traditional Parmesan is a highly prized ingredient. The slowly aged cheese is only made in Parma, Italy, and a 20-pound wheel of it can command over $1,000 at a market. So how can these restaurants afford to literally shower people in it as a free bonus for their meal? Well, you might say that they cut the cheese. The FDA has had their eye on big Parmesan for a while now, and they've found some disturbing things. Even products labeled as 100% Parmesan are often mixed up with cheaper-end cheeses like Romano. And some even use non-human digestible filler like wood pulp. High-end Italian restaurants will often bring a chunk of the beloved cheese to the table and shave it right in front of you. But if you're being brought a shaker and having powdered cheese dropped on your table, you might be eating something less than ideal, or even inedible. Not even the king of condiments is safe. Truffles have to be the hottest commodity in food. After all, how many foods have to be dug up by specially trained pigs? The real things are rare, expensive, and usually served in thin shavings for taste. Fortunately, there are other ways to get a little taste of the truffle experience, like truffle oil. The condiment is usually infused with the flavor of truffles, and it's known for its mild garlicky taste. It's a great way to add a little touch of luxury to an ordinary meal, and the oil often shows up on high-end menus. But it may be all nothing more than a shell game. Most truffle oils actually contain exactly 0% truffles. This isn't a big surprise. Truffles are so expensive that only a few restaurants actually manage to get them on the menu. So it doesn't make sense that they'd be mass-produced into condiments. What is really on offer in most of those truffle oil concoctions is good old food technology, a collection of chemicals engineered to taste like truffles. It's kind of an open secret in the restaurant business, but most people aren't looking too closely at the labels. And it's not the only oil that might be lying about its roots. As the Mediterranean diet continues to gain in popularity, with its emphasis on good fats as part of a healthy diet, one of the most popular items to indulge in is olive oil. Loaded with healthy unsaturated fats, extra virgin olive oil is prized for its light taste and essence of pungent olives. It's become a popular choice for dressing salads and sautéing fish, and it's often imported from Italy or Spain. Olive oil fans often argue over which of the top olive oil brands is the best for getting that authentic Mediterranean taste. But olive oil might be the biggest fraudster of any food we've discussed so far, with most of the popular mid-priced brands being exposed for not being what they say on the tin. Many olive oils on store shelves are actually diluted with vegetable oil blends, meaning you're not always getting what was promised on the label. Beyond being misleading, this can also pose a serious risk for people with food allergies, especially if the mix contains corn, soybean, or other oils that could trigger dangerous reactions. In the most infamous case, a 2006 investigation revealed that 76,000 liters of olive oil from Spain were actually sunflower oil, treated with chemicals to make it look more like olive oil. And because olive oil is usually imported and goes through many checkpoints, it's hard to know when the fraud occurred. They say variety is the spice of life, but this might be a little too much. There was a time when wars were fought over spices, but now you can just grab them in little shaker tubes for a few bucks at the store. With so many varied seasonings available, it's never been easier to spice up even the plainest of meals. However, what's in your spice rack might not be as pure as you think. Many store-bought spices are far removed from their original form. You get them not as the original plant or seed, but as a finely ground powder that's easy to sprinkle, and that makes it easier to hide. It's very common for popular spices like pepper to have fillers in them. Testing has shown compounds like colored starch, flour, and millet hiding in black pepper containers. And there are a few common culprits, including some sweet ones. Vanilla might be synonymous with basic and plain when it comes to ice cream, but the real thing is actually fairly rare and expensive. Vanilla beans don't often find their way to the dinner table these days, so most people get vanilla flavor from bottles of vanilla extract. This intensely sweet liquid adds a punch of flavor to many a dessert. What it doesn't usually contain is vanilla. Instead, using sugar, caramel color, and a synthetic compound called vanillin that mimics the flavor to create that famous flavor. And most people might have never actually tasted the actual thing. And the same goes for a beloved condiment from our neighbors up north. For some people, it's not just breakfast without maple syrup. The sweet, thick, nutty liquid is harvested from maple trees via a complex process during the early months of the year. The labor involved means the real thing is not cheap, but it's all worth it once you pour it over your pancakes. Unlike many of the foods on this list, authentic maple syrup isn't hard to find, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of imposters out there. That's because many popular maple syrup brands actually blend the real thing with fillers like high fructose corn syrup. And some of the most iconic options don't have any maple at all. For many people, maple syrup has just been shortened to syrup. The bottles served at places like IHOP from popular brands like Pearl Milling Company or Mrs. Butterworth are just concoctions of corn syrup, sugar, and artificial flavors. These options are usually much cheaper than maple syrup, but the real thing can usually be found by looking for the words maple sugar on the label. And if you try to pass off fake maple syrup in Canada or Vermont, don't be surprised if they toss you right back out in the snow. And if you're going to shell out money for the king of spices, it had better be the real thing. How much would you pay for a spice? How about $2,000 to $10,000 a pound? That's the price of saffron, an intensely flavored and colored spice that comes from the dried stigmata of the saffron crocus. It takes an enormous amount of precision and effort to harvest this tiny component, which is then slowly dried and used to flavor and color rice and soups. It is very popular in Middle Eastern cuisine, and there is a hot demand for it. But because of its price, the vast majority of people have never seen natural saffron. So naturally, some enterprising businessmen went, why not cut some corners? In its natural form, saffron looks like bright red fibers. These filaments are hard to fake, although some have tried, substituting fibers from cheaper flowers or even including dried onion dyed with red color. But the most common way to cheat with saffron is to sell saffron powder. This could be anything as long as it has the trademark red color, which is easy to fake. To bulk up the weight, sellers often mix in sugar or salt, making buyers think they're getting more than they actually are. But there is one key tell for when saffron isn't on the level. If you can afford it, you're probably not getting the real thing. And the same goes for one of the most famous spices out there. Sure, many people might only know cinnamon through Cinnamon Toast Crunch or hot tamales, but the sweet, nutty, spicy accompaniment is actually highly prized. True cinnamon, also known as Ceylon soft bark cinnamon, is pretty expensive and only harvested from the bark of a single species of tree in Sri Lanka. And demand has led to deforestation, which has only jacked the price up more. So the majority of cinnamon sticks on the market today are actually cassia, a much more common plant native to southern China. While the flavor is similar enough, fans of the original say it lacks the complex nuttiness of the real thing. But hey, at least if you're gonna go all out on indulgences, you can expect the real thing, right? Lobster dinner is one of those foods that is the hardest to fake. After all, you're cracking open the shells, but many lobster dishes don't offer a full steamed lobster. Rather, they prepare it and mix it in with other components. Lobster mac and cheese or lobster fried rice, anyone? Sounds delicious. But also, it may not be the real thing at all. Many dishes that claim to contain lobster are actually made with langoustine, a crustacean closely related to lobsters that thrives in the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. While it's a convincing substitute, the texture is different enough that true seafood lovers can spot the difference with just one bite. And even the most famous luxury dish of all isn't safe. Caviar can command several $100s a tin, and this delicate dish of sturgeon roe is usually enjoyed in tiny amounts by those who chase the rarest variants. But it's getting harder and harder to find. Sturgeon is becoming increasingly endangered, and the beloved beluga caviar is being taken off the menu. So naturally, imitation caviar has flooded the market, often made from roe of other fish, or in some cases no fish at all. Some samples have contained zero fish DNA, instead being crafted from vegetables, fruits, mushrooms, and even oyster extract to mimic the real thing. And with profits of this level to be had, is it any wonder the hustlers are out in full force? You can't make this kind of money on orange juice. What's the most surprising food fraud you've heard of? Do you think regulations should be stricter, or is it all just part of the game? Drop your comments below. For more things that won't be on your dinner table anytime soon, check out 20 U.S. foods you never knew were illegal to eat. Or watch this video instead.